So we all have been seeing news about the dire wolf revival, right? Same how it was, or are all these scientific claims about it really true or not? It's not a process. It's not a principle. It's something that involves pipelines and which involves steps to perform a particular task. Or is it actually a genetic simulation? What is a genetic simulation? You take any gene and you simulate it to behave in such a way or to study the behavior based on a particular kind of a simulation. So the entire agenda of this particular discussion and the meeting would be to actually answer this question that can this particular revival project be actually termed as de-extinction, or is it just a genetic simulation? Now, in April 2025, Colossal Biosciences announced the first birth of three genes edited canids, the Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi, which was marketed as a part of direwolf de-extinction, and we have all seen the news about that. But how accurate is this claim scientifically? So, what is direwolf? Everyone can see the scientific name. Lived in North America for like around approximately 13,000 years ago. But later on in the slide, we'll actually look upon real time difference between its actual extinction and the difference between them. Look like gray wolves, but not closely related at all. Genetic studies shows that they have diverged 5.7 million years ago from modern canids. Now, why did Colossal do so? Because they extracted ancient DNA from 13,000 and 72,000 years old fossils, identified 20 genetic variants in 14 genes linked to size, coat color, and immunity. Now, what are genetic variants? We all know genes, right? So let's say, for example, we took 14 genes, and from 14 genes, we took out genetic variants. Genetic variants are identifications. Let's say it's more like features that are involved with these particular genes. So they identify 20 genetic variants in 14 genes, which are more or less linked towards size, coat, color, and immunity. Because these factors are the one that would ensure that this actual revival or this entire project is actually viable or not. They use CRISPR-Cas9 to edit gray wolf embryos. CRISPR-Cas9 is again a process, it's a principle, it's a way of, let's say it's a biological process. It's a method which was considered to be revolutionary and was super efficient in doing it. But it's like how technology and how things work, right? Like these days, it's already obsolete and backdated. But still, it works pretty well. So they use CRISPR-Cas9 to edit it, and embryo is planted in domestic dog surrogates, and three pups were born.
Okay. Shagnik, I have a question over here.
Yeah.
So as you said, as CRISPR-Cas9 is an obsolete, it's a backdated technology. So do we have more recent or more advanced technologies that could have gotten us a much better result on the uh, genetic regeneration of the dire wolves?
Yes,
Okay.
because CRISPR-Cas9 is more like a generalized tool. It was never meant to be focused into something. It's just a method. Why CRISPR-Cas9 was popularized was because there was nothing in the market like that. Because it used it like old basic biological principles, but was doing something revolutionary. Now, as we all know, what's the revolution right now? Data science, analysis,
Yeah.
and things like that. So all the wet lab based experiments can actually be reconfirmed by doing a lot of computational things. Hence, the complexity between the results and the correlation between is the result actually efficient, CRISPR-Cas9 doesn't stand right now.
Okay.
Because it can just draw inferences. But now we have analysis to actually prove the inferences if they are right or not.
Okay.
Now, based on this particular experiment done, there are certain scientific and ethical concerns. These are very basic scientific and ethical concerns because, of course, these labs do have their own people to take care of all of those things, and everything was conserved. But the limitation being 20 genes, which was actually 40 genes, but let's say approximately 20 genes is the closest number to the number they considered, is 0.1% of the genome. So animals remain are more than 99% of the grey wolf. Hence, the sample size was very less. Traits like behavior, cognition, social structure were never created. They used more like what we discussed, the size, color, the coat color, immunity, and how it was actually behavior as a, like, let's say the wolf was looking like a wolf. But what about the traits, the behavior, cognition, social structure, food habits, its ability to stay withstand the particular climatic conditions? These things were never considered while they were doing this particular experiment, because as genetic experiments also has a branch of study which is not that robust, which is called epigenetics, which has histone modification and things like that. So epigenetics can also be a good part where they could have also said that is the behavior or the cognition or anything is like a wolf or like a dire wolf, or it can be like anything. Evolutionary biology has always been a question. Hence, these are the biggest scientific limitation, which is very, very basic, honestly. That goes down to very in principle factors. Criticism says that experts call this a phenotypical mimicry, not de-extinction. And this is what brings us to actually what is GNSRL is going to do. When experts say that the criticism that it's a phenotypic mimicry, we can actually prove it using like phylogenetics and other phenotypical processes. Ethical issues says that ecosystem risk, animal welfare and conservation distractions, also ownership of engineered species and biopatenting.
I do have a slight bit of an ethical question as well as a legal question. I think this was something that I was even talking about yesterday when we were discussing about this thing. Well, ethically, one thing that even I need to look into is something that we call animal rights, because as we know, for any kind of human experimentation, a whole consent form is signed that you're volunteering to the whole thing and you don't have any problems with that. But with animals, usually we don't get that opportunity because, well, we are animals, right? So, as you rightly pointed out, the mothers of these pups were dogs, they were mutts. I was just reading a news report that got released, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, which said that as soon as this whole thing was done, first of all, these pups were raised in a condition where the mothers of these pups were not kept with these pups at all times. Only one of the mothers who had a higher maternal instinct towards the pups was with them all the time. And as soon as they started developing a very natural maternal bond with their babies, they were severed away from them and they were given for adoption through human society. And they have been adopted. The families have no idea that they were nursing these cubs at any point. So, what does that really say to us about, you know, this whole situation? Does this have like any impact on the like the mother dogs, or is it even fair? That remains one question. And the other question that I was having is there is something called the Nagoya Protocol, which is an international genetic resource framework. And under that, for any invention like this, you have to define it in a certain term. Now, since this is something which we are in a loose term whipping up in a lab, would we say that this is a biotechnological invention? Or would we say that this category of wolf, whether it is a grey wolf or not, is just a digital sequence data, also known as the DSI?
And honestly, it's not a invention yet. Let's say it's a mimicry of what was happening before. Will this wolf be a new kind of a wolf or a new species? That needs other further consideration. But answering Namrata's question, genetically, there's no contribution of this much to the wolves. Actually, they are just acting as surrogates. So the pup's DNA came entirely from the gray wolves, and they were edited in specific direwolf traits. The moths were just there to carry the embryos, like human surrogates IVF. Now, health-wise, if it is managed properly by the people, it would, in principle, should not cause much of a problem. But there would be long-term risks for the survival of that particular surrogates, which is also similar to the human surrogates. And hence, of course, this opens a lot of questions on the ethical concerns. And of course, what's the center doing for this particular surrogates? If also a biggest question is based on this particular experiment, are the group actually looking forward to actually looking for more surrogates to edit something and give birth to other numbers of wolves? Then how are they managing that? So this is, of course, a really valid question, and I think it's still unanswered about their future plan, of course.
I have one more question. I'm sorry, I am very
Go ahead.
interested in this topic. I have a lot of questions. So, because we are talking about a wolf species that got extinct like 10,000 years ago or more than that, of course, the whole environment, the weather conditions, the whole pattern of the society was very different at that time. I know that the further testings with regards to the psychological and the behavioral similarities with the original dire wolf, sorry, the original grey wolf and these pups is still to be done. But let's assume that even if there is a chance that they match, there
Yeah.
was this statement made by Trump yesterday that the list of endangered animals in USA is increasing by the day, and it is becoming practically a Hotel California that once one animal enters that list, there is hardly a chance of that animal leaving. And this list needs to go extinct. And if that can be done with the help of these kind of technologies, then that's great. I was also reading that Colossal is in the process of resurrecting the woolly mammoth and a lot of other such animals from the Ice Age. So when we talk about these kinds of animals, is it even fit for them to be resurrected if such a resurrection is at all possible, scientifically speaking, with the kind of world that we live in at this point? Is it safe for them or us?
In principle, yes, it's possible, but the success rate of these are still questionable. Not because of environmental factors or how the world has evolved and changed in that period of time, but also that there's something. This would bring us back to a very big concept in biology is the convergence and divergence of evolution. So let's say there's a new species, which is like man-made in lab, in vitro conditions. And let's say, for example, this particular invention is successful. Will it actually be able to live or not? That's a question after the experiment is done. But in principle, that is of course possible. And if we talk about resurrection about of different animals from different timestamps, then that is definitely possible, but exactly the success rate is generally very low. And just because these labs generally have like I would say cutting-edge technologies and people who are actually interested in doing like less robust studies and doing something out of the box, they generally pick up subjects like this. And the best part of these are that someone down all these experiments are actually increasing the genetic variability in our the all the genomes available. Hence, considering the amount of data that we are getting right now based on these projects, yes, later on after let's say a certain amount of failed experiments, it can actually be possible.
Is there a chance of, let's say, after a number of experiments, we are successful in creating or curating extinct animals in the lab to an extent
Yes,
that they are 70% or 60% similar to the extinct species. Won't there be environmental imbalance?
of course.
A
The entire
very
ecosystem should change.
s- let's say some scientist or some company brings back the dinosaur. They become a very superior creature than the humans, than the animals that are currently in the ecosystem, and there might be an extinction of the humans as well
Yeah,
due to these experiments.
it can be. Yes. Of course, the entire ecosystem would be disrupted because we all know about the food chain, right? And
Yeah,
very basic concepts of food chain and how the ecosystems are balanced between plants, living organisms, which also has microbes and bacteria and fungi and everything. Hence, this entire ecosystem would be disrupted by resurrecting back certain animals which were actually extinct for a good amount of time. And humans have evolved in that amount of time also.
okay, one last question. What do you think bringing back the dire wolf, was it a good idea or a bad one?
It depends because personally, it's a great idea to bring back the dire wolves. And let's say, considering all the traits that a dire wolf should be having, it would be of much more use than already existing wolves, which we were missing for a good amount of time because they have more potential as a wolf in the ecosystem than the existing wolves now. But again, these are claims that needs to be proved
Yeah.
and requires further considerations to check. If like traits like behavior and cognition, if it's very harsh and if it's like a tad bit more than the wolves now, then that would of course be dangerous. But if it's a little less than the wolves, then can we consider that as a wolf? So these are the questions that arises.
So, why exactly are we discussing the dire wolf when the focus of GNSRL is studying neurotechnology and its impact on BDD in the fashion sector?
Personally, through my perspective, I see that this is a trending topic, and though GNSRL has a different motive, but it would be great to discuss this because through this particular case, we can actually prepare the team from my side to actually get to know about the biology side of the project or the discipline that SRL has. And this is something really interesting and also brings up all the disciplines that we have together so that we can actually start thinking about the particular problem both on scientific ways and also the allied disciplines. So I think this is something which is easier for everyone to understand, and I think we can actually come to a common point and we can start discussing in a balanced manner after this when we actually start working on the main motives that we have. Let's say it's bridging the gap between us. Just as we were discussing that, I was answering Saksham's question that do we have something more, better than CRISPR-Cas9 right now, which can actually help us address these questions better? Yes. The new technology is based on computational capabilities and parallel computing and high throughput computing and all of those things. Hence, the computational role for this particular project or the case that we are discussing would be to involve phylogenetic tools, which also involves Bayesian inferences and machine learning models. Which and just to give you a little insight into it, Bayesian inference is a statistical based inference. I think Saksham can explain this better. And machine learning models are, of course, like machine learning models, like the title, how the title says. But this is used to map evolutionary divergence, which means the divergence between the evolutionary gap between the host organism and the next organism. Then choose the gene candidates, predict the trait functions, and then coming to an inference where we can actually say that the traits which are not actually taken for the into consideration for the particular experiment done by the colossal biotechnology people, but we can actually prove them computationally, like the genetic simulation. But of course, we all know that computational predictions are not equal to functional certainty. Let's consider this slide to be a middle like middle state between what we discussed and what we are gonna discuss next. This particular study and this particular case has been a bold step in synthetic biology. Of course, it's not a true resurrection of the NSI and Dirus, which is the direwolf. These are genetically modified grey wolves with select traits which resembles the direwolves, but not really the direwolves. The project sparks valuable discussion on what de-extinction truly means. Bit of what I was doing to support just a particular statement of this case and to dive deeper into what actually this means. So, phylogenetics. It's the study of how species are related through evolution, like building family trees of animals. Scientists use statistical models like Bayesian inference and maximum likelihood models to compare DNA from ancient and modern species. These tools generally help us to answer how far apart are these two species genetically and what traits were inherited from which ancestors. Hence, in this case, we could actually find out how apart these two species are and then the traits that are questionable and was considered to be a scientific limitation could be somehow managed through this particular phylogenetic base analysis. For a proper phylogenetic analysis to happen, we need to choose the right genes to edit. So once scientists know how species are related, they look for specific genes that control certain traits. Can be behavioral, can be anything. Using computer models and ancient DNA data, they try to identify genes responsible for body size, for color and image strength, avoid harmful mutations like blindness and deafness or any kind of a disease. For the project, 20 genes were selected from ancient DNA and inserted into grey wolf embryos. What was the goal? The animal to look and act a bit more like the extinct animals. Now, why predictions aren't always accurate? Because even the advanced model predictions can be uncertain. Why? Because genes don't act alone. Many traits depend on a combination of genes plus environment. Some traits like behavior or intelligence are too complex to edit reliably. Ancient DNA is often damaged or incomplete, making it harder to be precise. Hence, the quality of your sample actually matters. So, while we can actually simulate the appearance, we can't fully recreate how an extinct animal would think, move, or interact with its environment. Because, coming back to the question, that environment has changed. Let's say, let's bring it into simpler terms. I loved this statement when I was writing it. It was like, it's like reconstructing an old song using only a few musical notes. We can only guess, but we may not get the full melody right. The tools we can use to study phylogen. So let's say now we are moving on to something more bioinformatics based things. So let's just explore evolution, like how bioinformaticians do. There are free user friendly tools which are always available to find the evolutionary family trees of animals, including the ones like direwolf. TreeFam, being the most famous, it's a database of gene families across animals, helps trace how a specific gene evolved across species. You can look up genes found in dire wolves and compare them with wolves, jackals, and dogs, which are not exactly closely related but has the same evolutionary background. and it's great for identifying gene similarities and difference. The tree time estimates evolutionary distances, tells you when two species split apart in evolutionary history. What we anyone needs to do is to just type Canis lupus and Inosine dirus, which are the two species, the grey wolf and the dire wolf, and see that they diverged at approximately 5.7 million years ago. Hence, you can easily prove what they actually claimed. Helps validate how close or far two species are genetically. Next is NCBI taxonomy browser, which dives deeper into the genetic lineages. What are lineages? Are relations between a particular evolution. It's an official tool used by genetic researchers, and it's updated a lot of in like in some days they get updated, and it's perfect for building your basic phylogenetic tree from where you should start your experiment. Like,
So this basically gives us a history or a sequence of how the animal has been throughout his genetic life,
exactly.
and based on this we can start where do we want to build upon now.
Yep. Yep.
And it gets updated very frequently.
Yes. So now let's look at some real-time inferences. I did this analysis by myself, and the results has been quite efficient. So you can see that it's a pairwise divergence time for the gray wolf and the dire wolf. And now let's say these are based on certain small factors, which I think we can discuss later more in detail if we are actually talking more about this particular case. But it also considers climate change and also like the time and all. And I think explaining this graph would require a lot more uh, in-depth knowledge about it, which really doesn't is needed to address the question that we are actually have right now. The image that you guys just saw is a pairwise divergence analysis between a gray wolf and a golden jackal. And the chart on the right shows that they are diverged about 2.4 million years ago, and based on three scientific studies. Hence, it's not manually curated, it's automatically curated. On the left, there's a geological timeline, and this kind of analysis just estimates how genetically similar or different species are. Are they actually closely related species or they are not? Based on this analysis so far, we could figure out that wolves and jackals are actually closely related species, and they, compared to the dire wolf genes, can actually give us good results. In machine learning terms, let's say this is the cross validation problem. So, this is the particular phylogenetic tree that I generated, which are the species closely related to our dire wolf. So these are the species that you can see that it's like a tree, and there are nodes, and which we can see that these particular nodes are the one which are closest to the dire wolf based on the different species. And that's all for the presentation. And we are
Can
open
you go
for
to
a
the last
discussion
slide?
now.
Yep.
Okay, like you're written both are closest to the dire wolf. So like, what's
Yes,
the difference?
between these two.
Yeah.
So these are species of jackals, and the others are species of wolves.
Okay.
Hence, hence, it's like we are drawing an inference between are based on evolution and based on phylogeny, are they actually conserved or not?
Okay.
And in both these nodes, you can see that they are actually closest to the dire wolf. Hence, there's a possibility that dire wolves can actually be created, and it's phylogenetically conserved. But again, does it answer a question that is it de-extinction or a genetic simulation? Still There's a question.
Colossal has actually made that. I haven't seen the picture. I was reading, I think they are planning to resurrect the tiger from ice age.
Tasmanian wolf.
No, 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 not the Tasmanian wolf. They already have made a woolly mouse. I don't know whether the pictures are available on the internet or not. All these animals are in some undisclosed location, but I know that there is a woolly mouse. There is this wolf now. They're planning to come back with the tiger with those like huge teeth in the front. Though
Ah,
it's an
the
ice
Ice
age.
Age
And
one.
yeah, and one more animal, I don't remember what the name of it was, but I was just looking at that if we are like, do they even qualify as, there's something called legal personhood that comes from the concept of having a cognitive ability. So just like we
Mm.
have that's again getting back to the discussion that if robots have artificial intelligence where they are having emotions, or for example the NVIDIA one, or even the one that Saksham was discussing yesterday in our conversations, I believe, the one that could emote, the one, what is that robot?
It is not something that emotes. It is a robot that was created for a museum for fun purposes, where it had to just wipe and bring pull back its own oil that was required to run the robot. It used
Oh,
to
right.
it used to do it very fun, lovingly. It used to dance around. It used to interact with the crowd. And this is what I'm talking about is 10 years ago, 15 years, 10, 12 years ago, I guess. Now the robot just cleans the floor and pulls the oil back, and it does not do any of the interaction with the crowd or anything. It looks very sad compared to the videos that we have seen before, and hence that raises a question that do robots have feelings?
So yeah,
Or
that gets back to the original question, that do such organisms have this element called sentience, which is what differentiates humans from any artificially engineered organisms. And if we are even resurrecting animals like this or coming up with new species, that definitely means that they are something that is artificially engineered, that is neurologically engineered. So more than which is why I also asked the question to Shagni, that would you exactly classify it as an invention or a synthetic animal, or would you just classify it as a collection of data, which is also this digital sequence data? Because what happens in these situations is like what I was reading, and from what I understood, is that when we talk about resurrection, it is not about resurrection of the body alone, it is also the reconstruction of the whole mind, which is what forms a major part of any organism for that matter. So,
mm,
which is exactly why we also have to run tests on these new pups to understand how much do they resemble the original organism that we are talking about. So yes, there are actually multiple questions even under patent law, synthetic genomes. All these factors are there. I think there is this thing called CBD, the Convention of, I think, biological something. I'm forgetting the name. I'm so sorry. Yeah, Convention on Biological Diversity. I don't think that convention really covers any animals that are made like this. I think years back when I was in high school or something, there was this baby sheep. There was this lamb that was being gestated in some lab. So they were trying to see whether a lamb can be created from scratch without like a host organism, like a mother body. So they created an artificial placenta and everything. And there were pictures where you could see the baby lamb grow inside it. I don't know what happened with it after that. But again, like we were all kids back then. So yeah, these
Are
experiments
you
keep
talking about
happening.
Dolly?
I don't know, might be. I don't remember. Okay, this thing came back like years ago. I think I myself was in junior school or on the precipice of going to high school. I don't remember. But yeah, there was this one lamb. I remember that very weird, creepy kind of a picture where you could see like it through a see-through liquid, you can see the organism growing. So yeah, that opens up a ton of question because of course if an organism like that is created,
that brings us to a lot of jurisdictional gray areas also, because I think companies like Colossal or any genetic lab that essentially is involved in the procedure of mixing genes and seeing how they work from different jurisdictions. So I cannot say that, okay, Colossal has only a US base. It might be that it has other bases which are undisclosed locations. Same goes for all of these high tech companies. So, what does that say about genetic engineering laws? What exactly is the regulatory capacity to which such neurotechnological inventions are regulated? All of those are topics that need to be thought about and looked into. So, yeah.
So, to conclude, we still have a question to ask. Are these dire wolves good for the environment, good for the human civilization on the planet, and good for the ecological and the biological system on this planet, or not? And these questions are yet to be answered.